Welcome, everybody, to episode 10 of Beers in the Lot.
This is a big milestone episode for us, episode 10. We're also going to check off another milestone tonight, our first guest.
We're welcoming Mark Maradei from the Steel City Nation podcast. We're talking a ton of Pens.
We're very excited to bring you episode 10, but first, please remember to subscribe, rate, and review on your favorite podcatcher, and also please follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Beers in the Lot. Enjoy, guys.
Everybody got a beer?
I do.
Oh, right on.
Absolutely.
It's Tuesday night. I've been online all day looking at names and boxes. That's what names and boxes.
All right, here we go.
Uh-oh, Aaron, that kind of looks like a seltzer.
This isn't a seltzer. This is
Good.
an Abolitionist Ale Works. It's a barrel-aged farmhouse amber ale. I'm trying to step up the game here, guys. No more 3 weeks in a row of Bush. I'm gonna have some beer.
Hey, we just saw Jenny Cream.
Hey, Jenny Cream's good stuff. I'm all about Jenny Cream. What are you drinking tonight, Daniel?
I got a Voodoo Ranger Higher Plane IPA. You know, nothing special. What about you, Riggs?
So I went with Flying Dog's Cujo Cold Brew Coffee Porter, since it is fall. It's
Excellent.
their other fall beer.
Nice.
So, yep. Try and stay awake tonight. What's going on over there, John?
I have the last of my jailbreak brewing, the Banana Heffa, that I've been crushing because I enjoy it so much. Yeah, right down the street, local brew. We support that stuff.
Yeah, man.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But I believe someone chimed in earlier with Jenny Cream. Who was that? Who was that?
It was Mark.
Oh, no, don't hang your head in shame. Don't hang your head in shame because of that. There's nothing wrong with Jenny Cream.
It's such a Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
I guess we need to introduce Mr. Mark Maradei, who is the host of the Steel City Nation podcast. Iron City Built, right? That's your tagline.
Yep.
So definitely Pittsburgh sports focus, but I think he covers pretty much all teams and sports around the country and the world. He's had some pretty interesting guests on his show. I think recently I saw Leon Searcy was on there, a retired NFL player. He's actually had Pittsburgh Dad on, which I thought was awesome because I'm a huge fan of Pittsburgh Dad on the YouTube. He's had various Pittsburgh sports media personalities on, so he has some insider information and connections with Pittsburgh sports. And I think tonight we're going to focus mostly on the Penguins, which means I'm now outnumbered instead of 3-1, now 4-1 Pittsburgh guys against the Washington Caps guy. So,
Hey, don't forget the other recent guests that he's had. Our very own Eric and John.
I forgot about that.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, actually, thanks to him, the day after Eric and I were on, we kind of were texting each other how much fun we had. Leading up to it, we just hoped we wouldn't shove our foots in our mouths. I definitely did. So I'll say that was Carey Price. He's a good goalie. Yeah. But Eric and I really kind of got like a bug to do it, as goofy as it was. So we definitely want to thank you for kind of giving us that little taste, and then we wanted more. So
yeah, definitely.
You know what I'm going to
sure.
do now? When the new season starts coming around, I'll get all you guys and bring you on my show, and we'll do a breakdown of the season ahead. And we won't talk all Penguins since the vast majority of us are Penguin fans. Hey, I want to share my beverage. I'm having a Steel City Nation podcast homemade pear cider.
Ooh.
Okay.
That's
Very good.
right.
Excellent.
Mark makes his own cider.
Hyper
A little hard cider never gives anybody, right?
That's right.
Nothing wrong with that.
Came on here to flex his beer, man. I like it.
Yeah,
Came to the right place.
Yeah.
that's right. All right, Danny. start us off on the Penguins. What the hell is going on with Jim Rutherford in that fucking front office?
Well, hopefully he's put the phone down for the rest of the off season. But
Yeah.
So I mean, they got rid of that bad contract with Jack Johnson, so we like that. I know you were a little iffy on how they did it, but I say him being out is a good thing. I wasn't too glad about Schultz. I thought he had a little bit more. I also thought that it was due to who he was paired with.
The Johnson anchor dragged him
Yeah,
down.
exactly. Who else did they pick up? They picked up Colton Sevier.
They picked up CC.
CC. Yes, that's right. I forgot about that.
For a very team-friendly deal.
Yeah, sure. He's going to be a sixth or, if necessary, seventh defenseman, depending on who steps up for them. That's, he's a number one pick from the 2012 draft. He's like the eighth guy the Penguins had picked up who've been in the first round in that draft. They haven't necessarily panned out for him, but, one of these guys has to latch on and play up to his capability.
And the interesting thing with the CC thing, you kind of heard rumblings at the end of the offseason from Mike Sullivan. They wanted a left shot, right shot pair all throughout the lineup, at least with their 6 guys. And now that gives them that. Even Ruedel and Ricola, who are now kind of that 7th and 8th, they also alternate as well, right shot, left shot. So depending on how you mix and match those pairs, that'll be interesting to see, because Matheson too coming over in the Hornquist deal with Sevier, that contract could look really good depending on what role he fills with the Penguins. It could look really good. I know the term on it is a little long, but like I said, the dollars make sense moving forward if he pans out in that top 4, power play type role as well, like Schultz anchored for a while.
Yep.
I think the hope is that he is resurrected by Reardon. They brought Reardon in to coach that defense. When Reardon was there before, he did an outstanding job on that defense. That's what he is. He's a defensive-minded guy. And they're thinking that fresh voice on that bench might help that defense as well. Going back to Jack Johnson, that albatross that they got rid of in terms of that contract, he went to the Rangers. They did us a favor.
And the thing that kind of aggravated me the most about that, unfortunately, is Jim Rutherford, throughout his time being with the Penguins, he has not been afraid, A, to move bodies, clearly, but B, he has had no problem throwing away 1st or 2nd round picks. The Penguins, between Rust and some of the other guys they've gotten in some of their drafts, it's always been 2nd or later. So they do have, at least so far, have a good track record of picking up guys after the 1st round. But my issue was Stahl was traded from the Rangers for a 2nd round pick to Detroit just to essentially take that contract. The Pens still had to buy Jack Johnson out. And then JJ ends up on the Rangers at a 1.125, I think, was his term for 1 year. Yeah. I wish they almost would have just traded another 2nd round pick to the Rangers, a year or two down the line, just to not have that buyout. My opinion on the buyout, and I've said it on here, if you're a general manager and you have to buy out your own contract, that's not a good look.
Well, what did we call it? An admission of guilt?
I said it was an admission of guilt.
So that complexity. Mark, what do you think the forward pair lines are going to look like after the Kapanen and now Zucker will have a full season, and Jankowski and a few other guys were brought back into the fold? What do you think their top 6/bottom 6 is going to look like?
So I talked to Dan Kingerski of Pittsburgh Hockey Now. I dropped his podcast just a few weeks ago on Still City Nation, and he told me that Kapanen was brought in to skate with Sid. Bottom line, he's brought in to skate with Sid. It's going to be Gensel, Sid, Kapanen. Most likely, it's going to be Russ, Zucker, and Gino. And then that 3rd and 4th line. That 4th line is going to probably stay status quo with Bluger and Ashton Reese. Come on, help me, guys. Who's the other guy?
Sevier and then Tanev would probably occupy that. And then I think
it's going to be Tanev. There's no question about it. If you look, they gave him all that money last year, and if there's one guy I felt, and I think you guys might agree with this, even Rigs, who's a big Caps guy, Tanev is all over the ice. He's a game changer. He's a younger version of Hagelin, to be honest with you. And you got to keep him in that role. He's got to skate fourth line minutes because he gets out there and does so much penalty killing and stuff like that. And then he's always, that line did a great job against top lines from other teams. That third line is going to be hit or miss now with Kingerski coming in. I mean, it's going to be interesting the way they piece that thing together.
Yeah, and I've seen some early looks now where McCann, I mean, I said it on your podcast, actually. I like the depth of the Penguins going into that round against the Habs, and McCann had a horrible series. I don't know if it was a lingering injury. He never got back up to snuff, from the break. But McCann can play that center wing role, depending on what day it is. I would like to see McCann. Jankowski, I'm intrigued by him because he's a younger kid. He has put up points in the league and at the AHL. So that'll be interesting to give him some minutes, especially in a lineup where, depending on how the lines shape up that night, he could be playing with some higher skilled guys. And even if you look at the Pens' bottom six on paper right now, there are guys that can move. And then I think Evan Rodriguez will probably occupy that other wing with that third line. I want to see a lot out of Evan Rodriguez because there was that stigma when he came out of BU that he was just Jack Eichel's running mate. And given his time in the NHL, I wouldn't say it looks like that because he's very serviceable. But even when the Pens had him, we didn't really do much with him. And I don't know if that's a product of the restart or what.
Well, one of the things they said when they got back in there and did, training camp 2.0 or whatever you want to call it before they did the restart, they said the best guy, one of the two best guys on the ice for the Penguins was Rodriguez.
Yeah.
They said he looked really solid out there. And they were glad to see him get cut loose when he did. And I don't know if there was something worked underneath there to get him cut loose, that they could re-get him, snag him back up or whatever. But he was one of the two guys who was really, really out there flying around on the ice before the restart. I thought it was a good pickup too. That line right there is really that's $4 million or less. That whole line, if you think about it. That third line, that's not a very expensive line. You pay more for that fourth line than you are there.
It's true. Pretty good value. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And especially when you look at some teams, what they're paying their current lineup, Pens are a cap team. We know that. So we got to find value, especially wherever it is. And it's interesting you mentioned we traded him to Toronto just to kind of get, the ball rolling, and then he was cut loose. It almost kind of reminds me of that Marcus Pedersen deal a few years ago where he took that low offer in the offseason for 1 year. And then when January rolled around and he could resign, he resigned for the higher dollar value, almost like a help us out now so we can get under the cap and cap compliant. And then come January, we'll reward you. Maybe Jim Rutherford had something to do. And I would like to think that, that he does good by the players, because unfortunately a lot of the players that have left Pittsburgh, Jim Rutherford's kind of kicked him in the pants on the way out the door. I don't think that bodes well.
Yep.
Patrick Hornquist, Justin Schultz. And you even look, a lot of the players weren't, very vocal about it, which, Hornquist did kind of say, one team wanted me, one team didn't, made my decision easy. But you look at Chicago now, what they're going through with Jonathan Taves talking about how they don't want to do a rebuild and all this. And then, of course, they issued a letter to fans today. Hey, we're rebuilding. We're retooling the roster. Sorry. So I'm curious to see what Jonathan Taves will say about that. But what other things do you have, Mark, on the Pens, like kind of this offseason? It's been a little weird, don't you think?
Well, the other thing, going back to what you were saying about Schultz, Kingerski was in a locker room in a meeting somewhere where a player made the comment about Schultz as Rutherford made that deliberate and nasty comment towards him. The other player said, I know I'm leaving this offseason. I hope I don't get thrown under the bus like that also, or whatever. So apparently there's some bad blood there from half of those guys. They feel like Rutherford holds no value in them. Johnny, what'd you say again?
Oh, I was just saying it's kind of been a weird offseason where there's been so much talk around the Pens about they got to move this, they got to move that, they got to do this, they got to do that. And you kind of look now kind of in a somewhat completed roster and you go, on paper, this looks pretty good. At this point, I feel much more confident today than I did after the Hornquist trade. The one thing that does bug me is I think defensively, they're not as big as they should be.
Oh, dude, don't start the size thing, though.
No. Well, as a shorter guy, I understand. But I'm saying there's no one there that's really going to push anyone. Hold on. Come on. There's no one there. There's no one there that I see that's really going to dig for pucks. Who's going to make you really get out of the way.
Right. But
in terms of the net.
But do they need to play that way with the roster construction that they have now? They have a ton, like that top six now, I think is back to that 1-2 punch again, with the moves that they made. That third line for the money is ridiculous. The fourth line, I think, is suspect. I think, and I know I've heard you guys make comments about him, but Zach Aston Reese is not that great.
Nope.
I'm not a big fan.
He is on injury reserve for 6 months.
Right, yeah. But I mean, when are we starting the season? So,
yeah.
So, I think he's a proverbial boat anchor for that group, and they're not going to see a lot of time, and they shouldn't because they're the fourth line. But still, like as we've seen in the NHL the last probably 5 years or so, you have to have four lines to be successful and to make deep runs in playoffs. They maybe aren't there, but going back to the defense now, I think they're okay. I think you definitely upgraded by losing Jack Johnson, letting Justin Schultz walk probably wasn't the best thing, but at the same time, there's still some serviceable guys there. Marino's still there, right?
Yeah.
Like there's still some guys there that can play and they can skate. They have some skill. So I wouldn't get hung up on size. I think GMs around the league get hung up too much on size, and grit and all these other things. Yeah, that's important. But if you're skilled and you can play a certain style, you can play the possession hockey style that, a Sid Crosby and a Geno Malkin want to play. Maybe you don't need to, sit back there and beat people up in front of your net or in the corners or on the walls. If you have the puck, right?
If you think about it too, like the guys in the league who are big, who are the ones you think of? Obviously Victor Hedman, because he's fresh in our minds, but you think of the ones that are also good hockey players, not just big guys who are banging bodies. I mean, size is important, but it's not so much as important as skill is important.
Well, Jack Johnson had size.
Exactly. And
well, see, the only
I think of a guy like Hal Gill, like he big dude, but he's just too slow. He's not.
The only reason I bring the size thing up kind of is we had two defensemen in somewhat recent history with Eric Branson and Jamie Oleksiak who could skate, had skill, and they're big. So I would say like kind of a poor man's Victor Hedman in terms of the fact that they're very smart with the puck, they make the right moves, and they're big and they can kind of play any which way. I like that, and especially with a team like Pittsburgh where you're not going to have kind of your top two lines. If you get hemmed in your zone, they're going to try and dig the puck out. You have Letang, I would say, is a little more aggressive, but he's a little emotional in the wrong way. He's not going to lay somebody out, in front of the net. He's going to slash him in the back of the leg, take kind of a goofy penalty.
Take a bad penalty.
That's the only reason I bring that up. But that's just me thinking that.
I don't like the Oleksiak move. I thought he was solid for Pittsburgh. I thought that was I don't know why we dumped him. It didn't make any sense to me. The Gabranson thing, I mean, that was just moving around pieces in a chess game, see if you could squeeze something out of him. That contract was just way too big for what he brought to the table. Yeah, he could move. Yeah, he took care of his own end. But as a sixth defenseman bringing in a $4.5 million contract, I mean, that was a little bit too much. Exactly. The top four for the Penguins, I think, are solid. It's just the whole Letang thing. Letang can only play with Dumoulin because Dumoulin stays home and he can make plays out of his end when Letang gets them in trouble. That's it. Bottom line.
Yeah.
That's it.
No, I agree with the Letang thing. I like him. I'm very curious to see too what happens with the Pens this year, because this is kind of the year. It's a big make or break year for the organization in general. You talk about kind of the salary cap constraints. Then you talk about, Sid and Gino are another year older. Letang's another year older. You have this new goalie tandem starting with the Smith and Jerry. And then you have to really kind of think how the pieces are going to work moving forward after this year too. That Jim Rutherford, I mentioned it earlier, him kind of trading away draft picks and somewhat of the prospects. We got rid of Addison in the last couple of years. Halinder, there's a few others I can't even remember. It's a laundry list at this point of guys we've had, and he kind of got away from them. A few years ago, the Pens, Mark, you may remember, we had like Joe Morrow, Scott Harrington. We had this quote-unquote young stable of defensemen, and the Penguins slowly but surely churned through all four of the prospects, and none of those guys have panned out. So the Pens, at least when they got rid of all those guys, it looked very favorable for them because they returned them all for players. But actually, I kind of hope. Isn't he? Where's he now?
Columbus.
Well, apparently, according to you, he was working at a mattress store.
No, that was
last time I said that.
No. It wasn't Harrington. I forget who it was. There was another one. I kept saying he was selling ottomans or something.
It was Harrington. That's the one I ran into. Yeah, I ran into him at Lucky's Bar.
It was Harrington? Okay.
Yeah.
Are you sure it wasn't like a mattress warehouse? You sure?
It could have just been any kid that looked like he played hockey.
Yeah, that too.
Rutherford just has no problem trading anybody, though. It's just scary.
So what?
I think Lemieux really has to sit on him sometimes. Who knows who he would have traded by now?
But see, I'm curious. Do you think that's all Rutherford? Because I kind of mentioned it the other week where you see all these moves. Do you think maybe Mario's kind of pulling the strings a little bit? I understand from what you hear, he's very hands off, but he is a Lemieux.
I honestly think he says, "Here's your budget. We expect a cup run. Let's go get it." I think Lemieux plays very hands off. I think he trusts Rutherford. Rutherford earned it by winning 2 cups in 16 and 17, but the well has run dry now the last 3 years. What did they've won 3 playoff games or 4 playoff games in the last 3 years? That's
and I've asked this question before to these guys. How much of those rosters in 16 and 17 were really his guys, though? Right? He was still kind of, I think, in those transition series from Shiro, where a lot of Shiro's guys were still there, and the roster was still constructed in that sort of Shiro plan, right? And so now are we really seeing the results of Rutherford's moves, and they're not there?
Well, the other question too, we're talking about how the well is running dry in terms of offense down in the minors, but do you think it's because they're just trying to stack up for the last few years of this window in the Sydney? You got to think that that's really what it is.
Yeah.
About it. Wouldn't you do that? Sid's
absolutely. Yeah.
Gino's 34, Letang's 34. You're reasonably speaking, your high-end superstars like that have never won a cup after the age of 30. So what they did a few years back was pretty tremendous, if you really think about it. And even Ovechkin, to throw some credit that way. He was 31 when he won his cup, or 32.
Right, right.
That's unheard of in the NHL, to be honest with you, especially with so many young kids coming in.
Yeah, the league has definitely got younger, right? And that's a testament to a lot of the national governing hockey bodies, right? Focusing on development and younger players. So now the players coming in at 19, 20, 21 are that much more prepared to play in the National League, right? So
they're so skilled too.
Yeah, when they come in, they have all the skill and talent already. They're there. They're ready to go. Mm-hmm. They may not have the mental game, right? And that's probably what separates superstars like Sid and Gino and Ovi and these type of guys, from those younger players. But it doesn't take long for them to catch up.
I think it's taken Connor McDavid a long time to catch up.
He's at a disadvantage. He's at a disadvantage in Edmonton. Edmonton has had such a horrible track record with developing players.
We've talked about it before.
Yeah.
so many number one picks, and how many of them do they still have? 2, McDavid and Nugent Hopkins.
Yeah.
Well, we got Schultz off him, and you
Yeah.
see how that turned out.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Schultz was an undrafted free agent. He was
And
undrafted
Marino.
Yeah, we got Marino.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, so the Penguins are doing a good job of picking pockets when they need to, but
only from Edmonton.
Maybe
Yeah, from
Edmonton's
Edmonton.
doing a bad job of knowing what they have.
Just
Yeah.
let Edmonton draft a defenseman and just try to get him.
yeah.
Draft anybody and try and get them, because they're not going to develop them.
Exactly.
So you might as well buy buy low, right?
Buy low, sell high. Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah, we'll give you a 6th round.
Yeah, I
guess we'll take them.
When do you think, Mark, the Penguins are going to cut the cord? I definitely see Sid retiring a Pittsburgh Penguin. Gino, on the other hand, I think that's a wild card. Do they want to keep them both there, or what's going to happen? Or what do you even think, in the coming years, what do you think that team's going to look like?
So year before last, when you were hearing all those rumors in the summer that Rutherford was interested in trading Gino, they were closing in on a deal with Florida. That wasn't just, smoke. That was reality. And apparently Crosby went to a meeting, sat down with those guys, and said, this is a 1-2 punch. You're going to keep him. And he had the backing of Lemieux, who was there with them. And I don't know if they'll ever cut bait with Gino. I could see them cutting bait with Letang. I could see Letang ending up in Montreal or a Canadian province. No question about it. I mean, I totally believe that will happen. I could see Gino and Sid both ending up as Penguins, though. Into the twilight of their career, I see that happening.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you mentioned Letang on that, because at the end of the season, he did that presser and said, I really want to play here in Pittsburgh. Like, almost like it didn't sound like a player who just lost, he needs to resign. It was almost like a player pleading to kind of, no, please don't move me. Like, what are you doing? Like, almost like latching onto the boot there.
So do those guys, do those core players, like I know with Washington, there's that connection between Backstrom and Ovechkin, right? And there's a connection on the ice, there's a connection off the ice, and there's very much a business and a financial connection that we all talk about contract wise. Is there any of that in the Pens core? Like if Sid extends, or if Gino extends, or if Letang extends, are the other 1 or 2 going to stay with them?
Crosby's going to get $8.7 million his whole entire career.
Yeah.
He's never going to diversify away from that. And Gino fits his role. Many years ago, at a point, Crosby was hurt, and Gino was leading them out of the tunnel. Last guy, I should say, he was bringing up the caboose, and Crosby came back, and ever since then, he succeeded to Gino, continuing to be the last guy out when they're both healthy and they're both playing. I think they have a very strong relationship, but they don't talk about that in Pittsburgh. You don't hear about that. You really don't hear about Letang having bonds. One of the things that, I really think stirred the pot for them, understandably so, was when Fleury left. Fleury was the guy in that locker room, and he was the common factor. That's why you heard a lot of stuff going on here over the last month or so about Fleury coming back to Pittsburgh. I think they were jockeying around to try and figure out, how can we move some money around and bring him back? Can we get them to eat this amount? Can we move a guy over here? Because that locker room, to be honest with you, is missing that guy. I know Kingerski told me that when they got to Toronto to play the play-in games, that after they were down and they were getting to the elimination game, a bunch of those guys left the bubble. They didn't even care anymore. Man. And I think I shared this with you, Riggs. There were Capitals who left the bubble. There were Penguins who left the bubble. The teams that we love and think, oh, those guys are dedicated to it. Those are guys who just walked off. They were like, I don't really want to do this. I'm good with it.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, the one image that always sticks out to me, especially you hear Penguins core, it was when Dupuis had those blood clot issues and he was kind of announcing his retirement and kind of, discussing the first issue of the blood clots. And there was a image from the presser where it was Kunitz, Letang, Gino, Sidney, Flower, and I think those were that grouping was in the back corner, and they all clearly were visibly upset. And I always thought, with the cup runs and just what that team's been through, that's the core right there. And if you look at who's standing from that core, it's 3 out of those 6 guys. So Dupuis, retirement, Kunitz left and is now retired. Fleury went to Vegas, and he may or may not be at Vegas, when the puck drops again. I guess we'll see what happens, but
they can't move him.
Not yet. We'll see what happens.
Can't move him.
Lerner's hurt.
Yeah, Leonard's out right now, but we'll see. If it stretches longer, Leonard may be ready. We'll see. But I always get that image of that's the Penguins core. And now that there's only 3, it doesn't seem that there's something like that excitement, kind of like you're talking about, where they're like maybe not necessarily not as vested, but definitely kind of that juice around the team that you get.
And I want to chip in here too, in regards to Letang and how there's not really bonds. Mark, like you said, there's not really, you don't get this impression that there's bonds with Letang. I think that a lot of Pens fans have a love-hate relationship with Letang anyway. It's like, what have you done for me lately kind of scenario. And he's, he does some things that you're like, stop it. Don't do that anymore. I see him moving before anything else. I think that, like you guys said, the locker room guy's gone. These guys are starting to get to the twilights of their careers. It wouldn't surprise me if Letang wants to stay a Penguin, but wouldn't mind going to a Montreal and playing with some other French speakers, like what he wants. Sid probably wouldn't mind it if he played.
Whoa. Easy now.
He'll never move.
It was his favorite team growing up.
It was his team. He wouldn't mind playing for Montreal, but I that would be if the Penguins didn't like him anymore, and Mario's running the helm. So no.
We'll run him out for one game.
And Aaron, Mark can probably back me up on this. Pittsburgh fans don't have a love-hate relationship with just him. There's a lot of people that fall into that category depending on the day.
Sure.
Well, it's not just in hockey in Pittsburgh either.
Yeah.
There's that's boring sports up there. They're always getting some gas. I think.
I'll let you know about it.
Here's my thing with Letang, though. As a core guy, I can't ever see Letang standing up and saying, let's tighten up the skates, let's get out there and let's kick ass. I just never see that guy doing that. I never see him getting in a presser and speaking his mind and talking about the state of the team after a difficult letdown of a series or a game. He just is not a leader type. Yes, he's a hell of a player. I get it. Paul Coffey, through his support behind Letang being one of the 3 best defensemen ever playing for the Penguins. But, the bottom line is, like, tomorrow the sun's going to come up if Letang moves on for me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm going to be pretty freaking bummed out if Crosby ever goes.
Yeah.
Okay? I'm going to be pretty bummed out if Malkin ever goes. But if Letang goes and we get something viable, thanks for what you did for us. I agree that you were a great player. Thanks for the 2 cups. Good luck where you're going.
Yeah.
That's just how I feel about it, though.
Well, I would say 3, even though he didn't play in the 1. But yeah. Well, and the other thing, Letang's had some hard miles. I mean, Sid, Gino, they all have really had some hard miles. But, like, Letang's had the neck issue. He had a stroke. He had a severe knee injury and a back injury, too. And concussions on top of that. He has a lot of miles. For a guy that logs the minutes he does as well, that's a lot.
Let's just suppose Matheson comes in and he lives up to his potential, okay? Because he's supposed to be one hell of a player, right? That's why they gave him a lot of money in Florida. They expected a lot out of him. Let's say Reardon finds that in him and he finds it in Pittsburgh. Can you move Letang, move Matheson up and still, function? Yeah, you probably can. You probably can.
I think Marino comes up. I think Marino comes up in that lineup.
He's left-handed though, right? Is Marino left or right? I can't remember.
He's lefty, I believe.
Okay, so is Dumoulin. You're not going to have Marino and Dumoulin. I don't know.
I can't. I
I know
can't,
they like.
I can't move Dumoulin. He slams 3 beers at once. That's you need that in the locker room. You definitely need that.
You need that
glue guy. Glue
yeah,
guy.
Exactly.
Well, Mark, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. We really appreciate it that you spent some time with us tonight. I just want to give you the opportunity now to let us know what's coming up for you on your podcast and what you're doing here in the future.
Okay. Thanks a lot, guys. I really enjoyed myself talking with you guys. It's always fun to talk hockey year round. I always say, I coached high school football for over 20 years, and I always say today, football was my number one, but hockey was always my 1A, even growing up. So it's always fun to talk, especially Penguin hockey. I appreciate that. On Steel City Nation podcast, this week we're doing a best of show with some of our best guests we have, including Pittsburgh Dad. I had Amber Theo Harris on last week. She was awesome to listen to. She's really done some great things with her career. Like I said, we have Leon Searcy on, Dan Kingerski of Pittsburgh Hockey Now. We've got some great guests coming up. We've got Chris Samuels from the former Washington Redskin is coming up for us. Gus Farrat, former Washington Redskin. So we've got some great people coming on. Yeah, little headbang there. But, I appreciate it. And listen to Steel City Nation podcast after you're done listening to Beers in the Lot with these guys. And thanks again. I really appreciate you guys having me on.
Hey, didn't you say you were going to be somewhere?
Oh yeah, this Saturday I'll be at Baker Park in Frederick. They're doing it's called Jericho's Silent Man March. It's about fatherhood, and it's a big production that's going on there. And my friend who's running it, David Brooks, asked me to set a booth up there, so I'll have some goodies to give away there, and just talk about the podcast. And I'll plug you guys there if you got anything you want me to say. For you guys, I'll definitely give you a plug there too. No problem.
Right on. Mark Maradei's Steel City Nation podcast. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Iron City built. So do we want to talk about Johnstown or?
I like how anytime we refer to anyone not in our hockey group, you always say Rigsby civilians. like you always say civilians every time.
Rigsby treats the whole thing like it's a tour of duty.
Well, no, because it really
in theater.
Think about it. When we're there, like it's.
Where are we? Where are we, Rigsby?
We're in theater.
That's right.
It's when we're there, we're in theater, because think about like all the coordination that has to happen to move like 15 guys around the town, right? So like our captain, we won't mention names yet.
Oh, captain, my captain.
They haven't been on the show yet, but once they are on the show, then we can start mentioning names. But so our captain coordinates moving everybody around the town in theater, right? Just like if we were on a mission, somewhere overseas. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. So we have one guy that's in charge in theater, right? That moves everybody around and gets everybody where they need to be at the right time.
We've got to drop his nickname.
And okay, so let me talk. Do you remember the story
nickname.
Do you remember the story of how he got his nickname?
No.
Okay.
I don't.
So when we go up there and play, right? We have to play at least the one game at the other rink at the North
Central Recreation
Center, which is in Ebensburg, PA, which is about 20 minutes away from Johnstown, right? So we were there, we played our game, and when we were walking out, some guys like to partake not only in the customary post-game beers, but also a customary post-game cigar. And said captain had a big, fat cigar in his mouth, and he was strolling across the parking lot, barking out what the plan was going to be for the afternoon. And I said, "Yes, sir, Sarge." And so he's been Sarge ever since, because he just reminded me of like some old grizzled sergeant in theater with his cigar in, barking out orders to everybody. So Sarge he's in command in theater. Maybe we'll have him on the show here when we're in theater. This coming weekend in Johnstown for the Slapshot Cup tournament.
I think that's going to do it for tonight. Thanks for the listen, everybody. Be sure to follow us on social media on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, @BeersInTheLot. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. And thanks for listening.